So years and years ago, when I just started my business, I recorded a pilot episode for something called Intercrew, where the idea is I basically interview people who have less common and less known roles in the media marketing type world. And I interviewed my friend Chelsea, who's a makeup artist. It performed really well. Like, none of my videos did incredible at the time, but like by comparison, it got a lot of engagement and people said that I was a good interviewer and they thought it was really fun. And I really wanted to do more of that. And then I didn't have anyone appropriate to interview for ages. And now I have my friend Salem, who is like a semi-regular guest on this channel. You could probably tell that we're friends and we have like a beyond professional relationship. But they are also a competitive bartender, and they often, when entering competitions, have to do stuff like take images of their drinks that they're providing and then promote it, and then even like set up a promotional event at one point they had to do. They did like a whole punk night at a venue. So there's stuff that ties into it, and I thought the content was really fascinating. But this was the last video I shot before I got my new camera, and my old one was like, it was getting close to like 10-15 years of constant action, and the pixels were blowing out and the settings were awful, and I had really bad lighting in the scenario I was shooting in. So if you can forgive all that, I think this is a really interesting interview and I would like you to keep watching. So welcome to Intercrew. This is the show where I interview people with unusual jobs in media and marketing, and today I have Salem James guesting with me.
Why, hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself and let the people know what you do?
Yeah, my name is Salem James, aka Three Raccoons in a Trench Coat, and I'm a bartender, and I'm currently working at Sexy Fish Manchester.
And the reason we've got Salem here is because bartenders are often in charge of marketing their own creations when they are making special mixology type drinks, not normally the people who just pour a pint, but a bit higher end.
Yeah, and of course, like, so you'll have your own company marketing, but then let's say if you had any competitions, or if you wanted to kind of just push yourself as a bartender, you can go down that route as well and market yourself.
So do you want to talk about some experiences you've had with marketing your own drinks in the past?
Yeah, so actually a really good thing was what happened a few months back, and that was with Chairman's Reserve Rum. They launched their Spice Lab competition. So what that meant was you had to make your own spiced rum with kind of a little bit of help from them and market it, tell the world about it, get people on board. And that was pretty much it. There wasn't really many more guidelines as to what you could do. So, you could have industry tastings, industry trainings, or in my case, my rum was called Punk's Not Dead, specifically because I wanted to kind of like garner that punk ideology that a lot of bartenders actually do have deep down. So what I did, instead of having like a standard industry event where I sit there and talk about myself for 2 hours, because it's not really a fun thing to do, is I decided to put on a charity punk night with live punk bands, and all the money went to a domestic violence charity in St. Lucia. So marketing that was actually a pretty fun thing to do, because I sat and shot my own content. Of course, one of the things which I needed to do was create my own signature serves, because you can have the rum all you want, you can taste the rum by itself, but how's it going to work in a cocktail? Ideally for that competition, if you won, it was going to be made and sold to venues, to different panels, anything like that. So you had to come up with some stuff. So my process was basically follow me on a journey. So what I did was I started the Prototypes Not Dead account. Of course, they were called prototype rums the entire time of the competition, because they weren't real rums, not to be sold on the market yet. So Prototypes Not Dead had a bunch of different things, including me, the creator. And I also decided to talk through ingredients step by step. I created something called the flavor stats, which basically we broke down what was in original Chairman spiced rum and what made Punk's Not Dead different. It was a dark chocolate and cherry rum. And then we started to talk all the geeky little techniques that currently when people look at bartenders, think like, your well-known internet bartenders, they tend to have two modes, don't they? They have the party bartenders, where it's, people who shall not be named, that make massive buckets of everything, normally with Everclear in America. And then you have your other bartenders who will talk about their classic cocktails and then go, here is my chemistry lab, here's what we do. So it's kind of finding that balance, because as much as I was promoting that rum, I also had to show myself and show that my identity was true to the competition.
So you can already tell that Salem has really applied a lot of the strategies and principles that I've talked about in videos in the past. Like, you say that there are people who have either the wild party vibes, or they really look at the science I'm doing. And that sort of speaks to a video I did recently about content pillars, and talks about the different types of content pillars you have. So I would say the party types there lean heavily towards entertainment-based content, but the sciencey mixologist types often seem to do educational content where they demonstrate what they're doing and how they're distilling processes, for example.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, if you are a bartender who's lucky enough to have access to a really cool production lab, then normally they'll show like these insane pieces of equipment. Then you're just like, what would you use that for? You're putting tomatoes in it. What's going on here? And then it gets explained properly. So then, the general public are then starting to learn the hard work that goes into a drink. It is quite literally not just alcohol in a glass anymore. Mm-hmm. And in terms of specifically where this is, the sky's the limit.
I was going to mute my phone and it didn't mute. So you talk about how you explain what your technology is and the equipment you use to people is. How do you think that plays into the audience that are actually watching the content you produce? Like, do your audience really want to know about the science behind it so they choose where to go on a night out, or is it more after the fact they go, oh wow, that drink was so great, how did they do that?
I'd say it's definitely the latter. I tend to view it as, like those really cool how it's made documentaries where like they take you to a factory and they'll say like, this is how bouncy balls are made. It's it's that kind of vibe that I think is pretty important. So leading back to the rum, instead of me showing off all the lab and all the process, because I actually used quite simple processes in terms of what other people have done in the past. I mean, some people have done like their true distillation. Some people have managed to like have access to tons and tons of rum at their disposal, whereas I didn't have that. Mm-hmm. But also the pots and pans approach is an approach which is very valid. As long as you are applying your knowledge properly, you can still create some really awesome stuff.
What kind of documentation did you have to produce for this competition where you did everything?
Yeah, so you had two parts. One of them was basically how you promoted it. So one of the things was, it was an Instagram account. It's actually still alive now. It's called @Prototypes Not Dead if you want to see what's gone on there.
I'll link that in the description.
Oh, that's horrendous.
No, that's staying.
Oh, that's so YouTube. Hey guys. Hey, what's up, you guys? Oh no, we're not
Hashtag subscribe.
Hashtag subscribe. So I made sure to only have small amounts of posts because it was a very strong balancing act between talking about the rum and talking about the event that launches the rum. Because at the end of the day, that I can do all the talking in the world, but if nobody tries it, how am I going to get feedback? How am I going to get anything that'll be really useful for the competition? So that was one part of it.
It was a very targeted campaign element.
Yeah, and then the second part of it was all of your supporting evidence. So I did a SWOT analysis for the first time.
Yes, we love a SWOT analysis. I'm actually going to do a video about how to do a SWOT analysis soon.
So it was very stressful. And also competitor market research. Of course, if you have a rum called Punk's Not Dead, then you're going to be looking at what kind of people would buy Punk's Not Dead and what else would they drink? So, there are some rums on the market that I like to call snake oil that I will not name here. And there are some rums that are also just very popular within the goth and alternative community that are not snake oil. So, you have your different options. So I did the competitor research on them, basically, even down to what good is it for a bartender. Like there's a very well-known rum brand where the bottle itself actually has 2 holes at the side of the neck, and part of it's to make it look like the eyes of the animal that it's produced, so it's part of its aesthetic, but also fantastic for bartenders. They can actually pick it up with their fingers.
Okay,
and not have to
so there's practical use for it as well.
Exactly. So that was another element. It's basically competitor research, and then how do we beat the competitor, and then strategy post competition. So the whole point was, if I won, what would you do with me? Obviously, we'd make the rum, and then over the next few years, how would we get that rum to be sold, to be a success? And how do we get it to become a household name, just like those other competitors? So my stance was, you have your two sides to it. It was Bible thick. When I say this thing was Bible thick.
Did you actually print it out?
No, I should have. I feel
slam on the table.
Honestly, send it off to London. Send it off to London with all the supporting evidence to go, here you go, judges, bam. Over the next couple of years, what would I want? And it was again looking at that balancing act of, because it's all well and good getting the general public to fall in love with you and get it stocked in Tesco, but then how are we going to get bars to engage with it? How are they going to sit there and then get bartenders on the side to actually then sit there when they are the people facing the guest day in and day out?
And this is like the debate between like, when's it a rep's job, when's it your job?
Definitely. And I think one of the things which is like, it is down to, especially in this day and age, your bartender does have to be more knowledgeable than you had to be in a few years ago. But also, if you like a product, you're going to talk about it more, aren't you? Like that's
Word of mouth is tried and true method.
Exactly. You know, if I have a guest approaching me at the bar, for example, or where I work now in Sexy Fish, and they ask me, you know, about 3 different kinds of Japanese whiskies, I can then speak to them at 3 different points from 3 different distilleries, because that's how wide of a knowledge base you need to have. But that's exactly the same as getting a bartender on side with rum, for example. You know, if you know, why would I'll pick a well-named brand out the air. So let's say Havana Club.
Okay.
You know, people see Havana, they know Havana, they buy Havana. So if a bartender gets very, very excited and goes, "Hey, have you thought about maybe Punk's Not Dead?" Or have you thought about like another really fantastic rum Zequiano that people don't really think about? Or it's like, you know, you have Saint Benevolence, which is a Haitian rum, you know, but if you get the bartender on side, it means that suddenly you're going to have the sales. It means that suddenly it can become a house pour, and your contracts are set, which means for Chairman's Reserve as a company, they then have that in their pocket. Mm-hmm. They've done their job. For the bartender, so if I were to win, for example, then I would have had the world as my oyster. I would have gone to make the rum, and then at that point, I would have had a rum under my belt.
So you made money for the brand, the location, and ideally you get a tip for yourself for the recommendation.
Exactly. And the upside is that, you know, I also learned a lot and I grew a lot. And on the marketing side, it's also something which I'm then going to lead on to, which was the actual event. Mm-hmm. Because it is, for anyone who may have planned an event before, it is no easy feat. Whether that is a small tasting, whether it's a house party, or whether it's to the scale which I did. So I found a venue that was at maximum 150 capacity. Thankfully, it was also the venue that I worked at the time, so I had a little bit more leeway there. And then it was deciding on ticket sales, getting the bands involved. Thankfully, I had a lot of friends who were already in the goth and alternative community, so they came together with lots of support from that angle as well. But then it's also making sure that event was talked about, spoken about, and the turnout was insane. It was like 50 to 75 people.
And you did not get a lot of notice.
That strategy was basically to have people come in, and because at the end of the day, I also then had to find a gap in the market that what would bartenders want to go to? What would the general public sit there and think of? And it's like, cool, so this is a pretty cheap gig night at a venue that nobody would have thought of to go to, because, you know, who on earth would go to the top floor of a random bar in Northern Quarter and suddenly there's just a drum kit there and there's punk bands screaming?
Exactly. I normally get scared I'm going into a hidden area the staff don't want me in when I do that.
Yeah, exactly. So it garnered a really cool experience. So with that, there were so many elements involved that I had to do a lot of learning about, and also stuff which I can then take forward, which then will lead me on to my next like kind of creative processes. Mm-hmm. Excuse me a second.
So this is stuff like in the past we've thought of concept names, like you have a drink and I think, how do we make it seasonal?
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like, you know, or I'll sit there for a perfect example was when I had to come up with drinks for Halloween, and I was like, I've got the drink. I just need like a pinnacle. Like I love Halloween. Everything spooky had left my brain at that moment. So I was like, cool.
Where's the USP?
Yeah, where's the USP? Like, you know, witches, vampires, everything like that. So then from there I managed to, you know, like pull out 2 or 3 drinks, got them sorted, situated, and made it match the name. But we'll talk about drinks creation in kind of 2 different types. So you've got drinks creation for a menu for where you work, and you've got drinks creation for competitions. And we'll start with competitions first because they tend to be a bit more fun, but they will also normally have a brief. So for example, if it's a tequila competition, they'll say, you know, minimum 30 mils use of the tequila of this brand. You're allowed X amount of homemade ingredients, and normally like there'll be a few more rules. So it's like if it's a Paloma competition, for example, it still has to resemble a Paloma. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, if it's a rum competition, if it's a zombie competition, for example, it's like it still has to be a zombie, but just your zombie. So with that though, you then get to have that freedom of what routes do you choose. So in my case, sometimes I have a name first and it just kind of hits me and it's beautiful and I can sit and work for it. Or in other cases, they'll even give you an inspiration yourself to go off. So a very famous competition that happens every year, Patron Perfectionist. I didn't enter this year just because I was very busy. But Patron Perfectionist, this year what they did was create a Paloma inspired by your favorite city. Mm-hmm. And you saw creations everywhere. It's beautiful. Like currently in the northern heats of the finals, someone managed to go through with an oyster as a garnish.
See, that's really weird because, like, obviously it's very unique. I like it. But then that comes into the question of how much is this for the theme and how much is this for taste? Because I would argue that fitting the thematics of the brief would get you further than actually making a drink taste good. Whereas when you're making it for a menu, I feel like that would be the opposite.
Yeah, so it is interesting because at the end of the day, to win a competition, you still have to have a tasty bev. There's no harm about it. And sometimes all of that work and all of that overthinking will still be overshadowed by someone just going, it just kind of tastes a bit wrong though, doesn't it? And that's all it comes down to. It's still an art form. At the end of the day, it's still very subjective. But then we'll move on to development for a menu. So in my last place, when it came to menu development, our brief was make it accessible. Mm-hmm. The general public are going to come in, and you know what the general public will most likely drink. They like 9 times out of 10 people like sweet, they like sugar, they like fun colours, and that's not a problem.
Good, because that is basically me being the basic bitch palate.
Yeah. But that is something which is never a problem. And I feel like a lot of bartenders will then, because I refuse to say the word mixologist, I personally think that it's very, very up your own arse. But a lot of bartenders and people who create and come up with these concepts forget that, you're creating for maybe your own palate or other bartenders, because let's face it, one of my favourite drinks is the Cup Survivor number 2, that's which I'm going to make a variation of for you later.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, the general public are not going to sit there and go, oh, yeah, you know what I really want today? The thing with gin, lemon, and absinthe. Yeah, that doesn't really fly, whereas...
There was the legendary mushroom teeny you told me about.
There was the legendary mushroom teeny that was on the previous menu, and we wanted none of that. So then the first thoughts were, okay, what are the creative processes? Let's look at how we can start. So what I did was I then looked over previous menus of the establishment that I worked at and saw what were their best sellers. One of them was a clarified pina colada. Simple concept, easily done. It looked very impressive because it was a thrown drink, so pouring from one tin to the other. And it sold beautifully. It was the same with, there's always a variation of a Ponce Martini on the menu. And again, those are concepts which will always sell, and that's something which you need to keep in mind.
So it's sort of like the reputation of a pre-existing drink is basically its own brand, and you need to put your own spin on it so you'll be able to sell it compared to all the other people doing classics.
Whenever you take a classic and make it your own, it's like everyone will always go, oh, but it's like a porn star martini, isn't it? It's like, yes, it is. And that's nothing to be ashamed of.
You can actually help breed familiarity with people coming into your venue for the first time. It connects them with what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So one of my favourite children from that menu, I named Persephone after the goddess of spring because it was a spring summer menu and I'm very unoriginal.
I love a visual metaphor.
Oh, absolutely. And the idea was it was a cosmopolitan, a French martini, and a Turkish delight, just all melded into this cute, beautiful little baby, and it was bright pink. Mm-hmm. To me, that hit all the selling points of it. Its unique twist was the fact that it was a pomegranate and rose syrup that was made very easily. Even though pomegranates are seasonal, you can still find ways to work around it throughout the year. It had a low GP, which is your gross profit. Sorry, a high GP, which is your gross profit. Mm-hmm. So, which meant that, bars can churn loads of them and not lose a lot of money. And then on top of it, it's something that people kind of saw and went, oh yeah, vodka, guava juice, okay, interesting. Pomegranate and rose, okay, that's kind of cool. And then people would also see this drink that was bright pink going across the room, and they'd be able to order it. So that's something which I found very important to me, because would I order it for myself? Actually, I wouldn't. It's not necessarily something that I like in a drink, but the general public like it.
In terms of menus, every menu will have the popular item, what you're known for. This getting away from drinks, but there's a place here called Bunny Jackson's, which is the wings place. So that's a bar, but everyone knows it for the wings. So when you have a menu where there are very popular items and very unpopular items, what do you do to get the unpopular items out? Maybe if you really need to use that stock today.
That's going to be entirely down to the bar's own processes. So in places I've worked before, they've either been done as specials, or you just have to try your hardest. Try and push it, and that's then also down to how you yourself are going to speak to a guest. Mm-hmm. So, I've managed to sell the mushroom teeny before, multiple times. So I'll have guests that look at it and go, "Can you please tell me what's going on with that?" And I'll say okay, cool. So here's the geeky nerdy part, and then which kind of fits the brand of what we are, and then here is the less geeky nerdy part. They'll get it sold. Where I currently am at now, thankfully, there's no mushroom teenies. I don't have to worry about that.
You're safe.
Yeah, and the geekiest drink on the menu has its own distillation with sourdough bread, but it's gorgeous, and it sits there and it makes my little brain happy.
Liquid bread.
Oh yeah, quite literally liquid bread. It's gorgeous. But even then, it still has the key components in it that will sell to people, which is it's still coffee based. The idea is that it's like coffee, butter, French toast in the morning. That's the whole point of the drink. So even though it's still wacky and out there, it's then been reeled in so the general public can still read it and not be intimidated.
See, what you've actually described there is something that in like the world of film and whatever is called the Enigma code. So you introduce a question and for example, the customer just goes, why? How? What did you do? And then that starts the discussion to get them through the sales funnel of this is what makes the drink unique. This is why it might be worth a go, even if it's just a bit of a punt. Then that's how that sort of strategy comes into menu building.
Yeah, exactly. And so obviously every company tends to do things differently. So where I am now, there's 3 venues. I'm part of the brand new venue. That's god awful. Hi, I'm one of the new ones. But what they'll do is they'll take submissions from bartenders from all 3 venues, and then they'll whittle it down. And you gotta take your lumps. If it isn't picked, it isn't picked. Try again next time. But then what they do, which is quite unique, is every time they launch a menu, they actually travel the world.
Okay.
So the first time they did it was Sexy Fish did it across 3 continents. And that was a lot of hard work because they had London and Miami and they were sending them all over. And it was a logistical nightmare according to the head bartender and the director of beverages. And then they sat there. The next menu came along. They went, what about just all the continents? How about 6? Why don't we just double it?
World tour. Go, guys.
Go on. And that's exactly what they did. And they had the Flying Fish tour. So they suddenly had bartenders going to Hong Kong, South Korea, Barcelona.
It's a very Asian-inspired place as well. So going to Asia is a bit bold.
Oh, definitely. And they knocked it out of the park. So, they were going with the menu that's currently active called the Trinity menu. But they did that in such a way that then people got to learn about it before it even actually hit Sexy Fish bars. And so with the next menu coming along, that's going to be the same anticipation because that's now what Sexy Fish are known for.
So you're just building the hype.
Exactly. And the cool part about it is that is a company that have managed to figure out their USP. They've managed to build the menu that makes it both appealing to the public but make people go, oh yeah, no, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Like, for example, like one of my favorite drinks on the menu as well is called the lime mint and silky. Okay. And it's very innocuous. It's literally like a clear rocks glass with clear block eyes. It's got a little green coin on it, and the liquid is clear. And when you taste it, it's minty, it's limey, and it has all these like gorgeous elements to it. And then as you taste it further, you then get even cooler bits. Like, you start to get a taste of absinthe. You start to get a taste of the modifiers like Empirical Soca, which I could go on about for hours.
I just know that clear stuff that has a flavour freaks me out.
Yeah.
In the cool way, but whoa.
Exactly. And that's when people go, oh, why is it clear? It's like, oh, well, we use this technique. How cool is that? It's been around since medieval times.
Yeah, we know the history, we know the science, we got everything here.
Yeah, exactly. But it's beautiful and it's innocuous. When people taste it, they sit there and they just go, God damn, that's a good drink. Like, and there's no harm about it. And whether that be from someone who maybe only drinks espresso martinis and they're trying something new for the first time, or there's someone who has gone round and goes, oh, I love a cocktail, me. I've gone to the American bar in the Savoy Hotel. I've ordered a hanky-panky. I know what that is. That's what Sexy Fish have done to kind of garner themselves as a name with a reputation. And it also means that bartenders now that are coming in, so I have the opportunity to now learn their way, their standard. And also, I now have the access to stuff which I never had before, aka like a lab with really good equipment. The fact that I can now sit here, and if I have an idea for a competition, or when it's time for the next menu to have submissions, I have that in my arsenal. So then when it comes to it, I can put my own drink on there, sure, and I can put my own drink on my own socials if I decided to, and go, hey, this happened, this really well-known bar that everyone knows, I did it, yay.
Awesome.
But also it means that Sexy Fish are going to sit there and go, okay, here's our new menu. Here's what we're doing. We're sending all of our bartenders all over the world again, this time with more because we've got the Manchester bartenders. Let's go.
How would you say a big multi-location brand, like Sexy Fish, for example, or choose any other example you want, how do they balance having their internationally recognized brand remain consistent throughout all the different locations and regionalising their experience so the local audience actually appreciates it?
That is a really interesting question because where I work has its very unique selling points. One of them being is Japanese whiskey. However, in Miami, it's not Japanese whiskey, it's tequila because of the location they are in the States. So what they've done is they basically gone, we are a heavily Japanese inspired Asian restaurant where you can come in, you can get these amazing pieces of food, but also when you look at that back bar, it's something that you might feel a bit more maybe still intimidated by, because, you know, in Miami they'll have rows upon rows of tequila from every single brand known to man, and from high end to low end, and you'll see that there. And it's the exact same in Manchester and London with Japanese whiskey. But what they're doing is they're sitting there and going, have the option to try. And all of it's even right down to just the design of the bartender's uniform, how they expect us to speak to a guest. And you can also see how that's applied in a place like Sexy Fish, but also have a look at TGI Fridays.
Solid point.
TGI Fridays, you know, it's known globally. And then UK TGI Fridays, very different to American TGI Fridays. I mean, we've seen every YouTube video under the sun where it's like UK versus US versus Australia on.
Exactly. Which McDonald's is the best?
That's a really good way of seeing it. So sometimes it's differences in menu or stock. Other times it's approach. So it's like back in the day when TGI Fridays was all flair bartending and like pouring from heights and stuff like that. That was their USB. And now it's kind of making sure that you get food at like a decent quality at a decent price, and it's accessible for all ages. Versus, I'll pull another one out of the hat. So Crazy Pedro's. So Crazy Pedro's it's known as a pizza place, but it's actually a tequila and mezcal bar.
Okay.
So its USP is its pizza. You've seen it everywhere.
It's greasy. It's a full meal on pizza.
You have the amazing head chef sit there and just go, all right, Big Mac on a pizza. Gorgeous. Got it. Let's move on.
Art.
Exactly. But then you'll also see on the social media, it's like, oh, cool, yeah, wait, you can get like margaritas. Nice, didn't know that. Know that for next time. And then suddenly you'll go in there and you'll see just this really interesting back bar, and you'll be like, wait, what's mezcal? What is that? A bartender's gonna go, well, let me tell you, here's where this has come from. So it's finding that USP and then making it accessible to the general public, and I've just shown you there like 3 different levels of casual. So it's like, you know, Sexy Fish being more high end and could be seen as a bit intimidating for your regular person, but they're still seeing that, yeah, it's still a fun time. You can still go in. No one's going to look down on you.
Well, no one's going to give you money if you go out there and go, God, that was stressful.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you know, your bartender will never look down on you for say, oh, can I just have a beer? No, that's fine. That's
why it's there.
And yeah, that's why we sell it. And then, you know, you'll have TGIs where it's a globally known, recognized name. And what they do is they want to keep their consistency. Like, you know, you're going to TGIs because you know it's TGIs. And then you have the idea of Pedro's, which is only really in the north of the UK. But they're known, one, for their very silly social media. They're known for their pizzas. And then they're known for the surprise tequila and mezcal. And it's like that kind of chill, dive bar, party bar, skateboard, good vibes. So I think that's normally how companies tend to approach it. That's something which I don't have the best knowledge about because I'm not in that managerial point. I'm just a regular bartender that sings bevs.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
I think one thing which I will say is that, like, because a lot of people view bartending as like unskilled labor, or they'll see people still behind that bar as 2 different entities. They'll either see bartender and it'll be someone who'll pull you a pint, be like, oh, all right, bud, yep. Double vodka Red Bull, yeah, let's go, no worries. Or they'll look at someone who's, and they'll call them a mixologist, and that's as soon as they pick up a cocktail shaker. Or it's like, you know, or they'll say, oh my God, yeah, my mixologist. There's normally like some dude with a mustache and a weird hat.
It's always the weird hat.
Yeah, it's always like the weird hat or the mustache or like the 3-piece white suit or, you know, something like that. It tends to circle out. It was 3-piece white suits for a bit. Now it's like the same kind of straw hats that you see in Cuba. And it's like, you know, they'll sit down and they'll go, oh, well, let me tell you about this particular bourbon from this region. And it's going to cost you £70 for a shot.
Rather not, mate, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I normally see bar staff as falling into those 2 categories. That is very quickly not becoming the case anymore. Don't get me wrong. You still get either end. But everyone, to an extent, has been either end already. And not only are you selling your stock, you're not only selling your brand, you're selling yourself. At the end of the day, people can come back for an amazing bev, but they're going to come back for the person as well.
Because that makes the experience.
It's basically, don't be a dick.
And on that note, let's make some drinks.
Hey.
Please let me know what you think. Thank you. Have a nice day. Subscribe.